Chapter 5:12 Yang Shiqing's secrets. Obviously, those dowries weren't given away as gifts but just transferred to somewhere that still belonged to him. The problem with this is that there would be a record in the account books. It would be difficult for her to get all her mother's dowries back now, unless both sides completely shed all pretenses of cordiality. What's wrong? Zhou saw that her expression was wrong and quickly asked, "Is something wrong?" Yang Wanning didn't hide anything and told her what she had discovered. She then asked, "This is what one found. What else is hidden away from me?" "My father is just..." Zhou patted her on the shoulder and didn't know how to comfort her. It was inappropriate to scold her father in front of her. Nothing else mattered now anyway, as everything was too late. In the end, Zhou could only say, "The most important thing for you now is to stay alive. As long as you grow up safely, we can deal with the rest later." Yang Wanning nodded and then returned the list to her. "Sister-in-law, please help me keep this. I'll return to ask you for it when I need it." "Alright, don't break off with your family when you return. You have to leave a way out for you and your brother." "I understand. One will be careful." Yang Wanning reassured Zhou and went back with Chuanxi. When night came, Zhou mentioned this matter to Gu Qingrui. Gu Qingrui heard this and said, "The first prince's wedding date is set for the 28th of this month. Speaking of which, it's less than half a month away. Maybe you can go and take a look to see if the dowry that the Yang family has prepared for Yang Wanyu consists of anything from my late aunt. If there is, it means that Yang Shiqing has long had these evil thoughts. Perhaps he had played a part in the Gu family being raided back then." "Got it. It seems that it's better for a couple to marry with equal social status. Otherwise, it's not surprising for something like this to happen. Especially marriages where the woman is from a higher status." Gu Qingrui nodded in agreement but knew that wasn't the scariest part. What's worst was marrying a man with terrible intentions from the start. On the one hand, they wanted to take advantage of their wife but still wanted to maintain their dignity. As time passed, the man's thinking would get increasingly distorted. Gu Qingrui got up and said, "I'll go get busy and make a pot of chicken soup later." After saying that, he went to the other side of the river and got busy. Zhou went outside her warehouse and began to check on the situation of the various mother goddess temples. After confirming that there were no abnormalities, she blessed 2 new little statues and went directly to the Yang family. However, she did not just check Yang Wanyu's dowry. Instead, she started a carpet search at the Yang residence. What she didn't expect was that Mrs. Cui and her daughter didn't have much private property, and they didn't have many valuable things. Even the entire Yang family seemed to be very poor on the surface. However, she found a secret room in the rockery next to the Yang family's pond, and the things inside almost blinded her. There were over 100 boxes of silver ingots worth 100 taels each and over 50 boxes of gold ingots. In total, it was 6 million taels of silver. More importantly, more than half of the silver was official silver ingots, which meant that he had embezzled them from somewhere. It was weird, as the amount of wealth hidden away here was not supposed to be possible for the Yang family. After all, Yang Shiqing was a commoner with no prominent family background. He had only been the Minister of Revenue for 3 to 4 years, and the wealth inside this secret room was too much. She began to search carefully in the secret room. As expected, there was another small room inside. There were some antique paintings and calligraphy in it, and all of them were exquisite, some of them coming from the palace. There were a few account books and letters in a secret compartment on the wall as well. Zhou read them one by one. The account books mainly recorded the gold and silver outside, and she memorized them carefully. The record started 12 years ago, but there weren't many initially. Also, many of them were related to the Gu family. Chapter 5:13 The culprit. In other words, the Yang family has always relied on the Gu family since a few years ago. Now that Yan Shiqing was openly taking away the Gu family's dowry, it was just absolutely disgusting. After that, Zhou carefully read the contents of the letters. She did not expect it to be a letter between Yang Shiqing and the Empress Maiden family, the Sun family. However, it was not from the Marquis of Dingan but from his younger brother, Sun Wenhao. He was a businessman who managed their family business. He had established a connection with the first prince roughly 6 years ago. Unfortunately, there was no information on him participating in the Gu family's raid. Of course, it could not be ruled out that the first prince and the others did not truly trust him back then. After all, from Yang Wanning's words, Yang Shiqing had treated the three of them quite well before the Gu family's accident. Another possibility was that Yang Shiqing feared this information would leak and destroy those pieces of evidence. But regardless of that, just based on the gold and silver stored here, it could be seen that Yang Shiqing was not a good person. Just as she was about to leave after wiping away the traces of her presence, she suddenly heard a series of faint footsteps approaching from afar. Soon, the footsteps gradually became clearer, and Zhou Ying's presence stayed behind. A black figure carrying an oil lamp entered the secret room a moment later. However, the person did not enter from the entrance she discovered. Instead, a trapdoor was opened below the secret room. When the trapdoor opened, the person was able to enter inconspicuously. With the help of the weak light, Zhou confirmed that the person was Yang Shiqing and then waited on the side. At the same time, she was impressed by Yang Shiqing's cunning. Even she was fooled by this double-layered mechanism. She saw him enter, close the trapdoor, and admire the various things in the secret room. He was especially focused on a landscape painting. He stared blankly at it for a while before carefully putting it away. He closed the trapdoor, took a letter from his sleeve, and put it in a secret compartment. Then, he reopened the trapdoor and walked out with his oil lamp. After he left, Zhou read the letter that he had put in. It was a letter personally written by the first prince regarding the fact that 100,000 taels of silver had been placed in a manor and that he should claim it as soon as possible. Where did this corruption come from? 100,000 taels of silver. How much of this is from the commoners? Zhou said it through gritted teeth. However, the letter did not mention anything else. She had no choice but to use her spiritual senses to chase after Yang Shiqing quickly, and surprisingly, she ended up in an ancestral hall. Meanwhile, Yang Shiqing had already returned to his study room to sleep. Just as she was about to leave, she remembered the purpose of her visit. She went to the central courtyard and discovered Mrs. Cui's list of Yang Wanya's dowry. Zhou was taken aback by the total of 66 sets of dowries. There were also 2 manors and 2 shops. If she remembered correctly, they were all the dowries from the Gu family. There were also a lot of silks and satins, as well as calligraphy and paintings. She couldn't remember which belonged to Mrs. Gu and which didn't, but Zhou was pretty confident that the majority of them did. Finally, she found the deeds of the 2 manors and 2 shops that belonged to Mrs. Gu. As expected, they were already under Yang Wanya's name. Sigh, what a shameless woman Mrs. Cui is, she couldn't help but sigh. How could she have done it? Yang Wanning's dowry is probably nothing compared to this. What a black heart the woman has. At this moment, she suddenly thought of the hardy ice plant in Yang Wanning's tea leaves. Perhaps Mrs. Cui did not even plan for Yang Wanning to get married at all. Thinking of this, she conjured a dream for Mrs. Cui, which the late Mrs. Gu kept demanding for her life. After a while, Mrs. Cui was so scared that she broke out in a cold sweat. At the same time, she kept shouting, don't look for me. If you want to find the culprit, go look for Yang Shiqing or the Empress. Chapter 5:14 Small Punishment. Zhou was so angry after hearing that she used her spiritual senses to choke her neck. After struggling slightly, Mrs. Chui suddenly woke up and sat up with sweat all over her face. After sweeping a glance around, she heaved a sigh of relief and gulped down the glass of water by her bed. At this moment, the maidservant on night duty walked in and asked, "Madam, are you all right?" "It's nothing. One just had a nightmare. Go and rest." Mrs. Chui waved her hand. After her emotions calmed down, she sneered and whispered in a low voice, "What an idiot. After so many years, she doesn't even know the person sleeping beside her clearly. Without his permission, would I dare to do anything? Now, you are even demanding for my life. When I'm done, 111 definitely find a monk to suppress you and make sure you never reincarnate. There are still your 2 brats who will become stepping stones for my children." Zhou was speechless after hearing this. She gained a deeper understanding of the evil intentions of Mrs. Chui. At the thought of this, she found a bottle of laxative in her storeroom and injected it into Mrs. Cui's body as a small punishment. Once that was done, Zhou Ying's spiritual senses returned to her interspace. After that, she found that there were quite a lot of plump, sizable river fish in her interspace. She fished up all the bigger fish that weighed more than 5 pounds. She scooped up most of the leftover fish and scattered them into various rivers through her mother goddess temple. Finally, she picked out the green and black carp, made them into fish balls with her machinery, and froze them in her storeroom. The rest of the fish were also stored in her storeroom. After finishing his work, she took a black carp that weighed about 3 pounds and returned to the villa. Quickly, she cooked a plate of sweet and sour fish. Before it was done, Gu Qingrui came in with a chicken and asked, "Oh, cooking fish? I just cleaned up the fish in our river and decided to cook one for lunch." "I see. Are we still going to make chicken soup?" "Why not? I haven't had chicken soup for a long time." "All right." After Gu Qingrui finished speaking, he soaked the chicken in boiling water, scooped out the scum, and later placed it into a clay pot. He added in some red dates and wolfberries. Once they had bloomed, he lowered the flames and slowly stewed them. Of course, the chicken soup would take a while to be ready. Zhou brought over 2 cans of beer, and the couple began to eat the sweet and sour fish happily. After finishing their meal, Zhou told him what she found in the Yang residence. "This Yang Shiqing is sure scum, leeching off a woman and even sucking her dry. He didn't even leave behind a single bone clean. In that case, Yang Shiqing is likely to have been in contact with the Sun family from the beginning. Back then, his marriage with the Gu family should have been part of a conspiracy. After all, Princess Pingyang was on the 4th prince's side from the start. Does this mean it was all planned by the Empress and the others? It's not impossible. What patience they have, waiting out a plan for more than 10 years. I would have reported him if one wasn't afraid that Yang Wanning and her brother would be implicated. In fact, you can take away all the things he hid and make him anxious. Once he is anxious, the family will fall into chaos. This is an excellent opportunity for the siblings to leave the Yang family. Otherwise, if this continues, the siblings will meet a bad end." Zhou looked at him in astonishment. The last time she went to collect the Qiao family's remains, he acted reluctantly. She did not expect him to take the initiative to mention this now. How strange. What's with your expression? Gu Qingrui smiled and knocked on her head. Your stance changed too quickly. I can't keep up. Zhou rubbed her forehead and replied unhappily. Chapter 5:15 Seizing Everything That Was Then. Times are different, and we are in a different era. If we continue to do things according to the standards of our previous lives, I'm sure even our bones and dregs will be eaten clean. Moreover, Yang Shiqing was even willing to sacrifice Yang Wanning and her brother. He's lower than a beast, and there's no pitying him. Also, getting rid of such a corrupt officer could also be considered getting rid of evil for the people. That's true. Anyway, young Shiqing and the others had already planned to kill the siblings. Zhou agreed and ran back to her storeroom. Soon, she took away everything in the Yang family's secret room. After a moment of hesitation, she also collected everything valuable in the Yang residence, including the private items of Mrs. Cui. Even Yang Wanning and her brother's things were not left behind, just in case. After a busy day, Zhou finally left her storeroom with a tired face. When she turned her head, she was shocked to see Gu Qingrui waiting at the side and almost fell to the ground. Gu Qingrui quickly supported her and looked at her pale face. He promptly asked, "Babe, are you all right?" "I'm fine. Maybe one used too much of my spiritual sense tonight, so I'm a little dizzy. Let's go back to the villa first. 111 give you a head massage." After Gu Qingrui finished speaking, he immediately carried her into his arms like a princess. Returning to the villa, Gu Qingrui first went to the kitchen to take a look at the clay pot. After opening a gap, he washed his hands and returned to his bedroom to give Zhou a good massage. Zhou fell asleep halfway through the massage. Gu Qingrui had no choice but to cover her with the blanket, set an alarm, and go to the kitchen to keep an eye on the chicken soup. Zhou was later woken up by the alarm clock. She turned off the alarm clock, and closed her eyes to sleep further. Gu Qingrui had to shake her awake and say, "Babe, we have to hurry out, or else it will be troublesome if the maidservants find out that we are missing." Zhou paused for a moment after hearing that. After she returned to her senses, she picked up her clothes and brought him out of her interspace. She quickly crawled into her blanket and went to sleep once she came out. Gu Qingrui shook his head when he saw this. He tucked her in, turned around, and walked out. Zhou slept until dawn. As soon as she woke up, she heard suppressed chatter outside. She immediately got up and put on her clothes. She then asked Shizhu to bring in some water for her to wash up. "Did something happen outside?" she asked after washing up. "The residence is fine, but the Yang family said that they lost something valuable and have sealed the city." "Yang residence, Miss Wanning's residence." Right, Miss Wanning is waiting for you outside. I'll go out now." Zhou nodded. At the same time, she was surprised. She did not expect Yang Shiqing to have the capability to seal the city. This was the capital, and not just anyone could seal it. It seemed that the first prince had made a move. She simply applied some light makeup and walked out. Yang Wanning turned her head and saw Zhou looking tired. Yang Wanning immediately stood up and asked Zhou, "Sister, are you sick?" "No, I just drank too much tea last night and slept too late, so I'm a little tired." When Zhou said this, she saw no trace of sadness on Yang Wanning's face. She even looked radiant. Zhou asked curiously, "I heard Shizhu mention that the Yang residence was robbed. Why do you look fine?" "Yeah, we were robbed, but I feel that it's fine. Most of those don't belong to me and my brother anyway. In fact, this is good. If they want to act poor, everyone should be poor together. This way, I doubt they will have any more bad intentions." Chapter 5:16 Raising money. From what you're saying, does it mean there are quite a number of things that have been stolen? Yes, all the valuable things in the residence are gone, not even a single silver was left. If it weren't for the fact that they didn't take a fancy to the food in the residence, we probably wouldn't even be able to eat. Yang Wanning pointed to her head and said, "Did you notice anything missing from my head? Even the jewelry has been stolen clean, so I can only comb my hair with a pearl flower comb that I had when one was young." "Whoa, how much hatred does this robber have toward your family?" "I'm not sure, but everything about this matter is just strange. Normally, there should be some movement when thieves steal so much of our stuff, but I didn't hear any movement at all. Now, many people are suspecting that our residence has provoked some dirty things. Cough cough, the ghost doesn't need money, it would prefer taking your lives. That's true, but you don't know how terrible my father's face is now. His face is basically as green as you can get, and his knees were even wobbling. At that moment, Shizhu walked in with a bowl of soup noodles. Zhouing asked Yang Wanning, "Have you eaten?" "Yes, the thieves didn't steal the food at home." Yang Wanning replied. "All right, I will start eating then." Zhouing then lowered her head and started eating her bowl of noodles. "Let's go. It'll bring you to buy 2 sets of jewelry." "No need. If I bring any jewelry back, it'll just be confiscated. I think it's enough to continue using my pearl flower comb." Yang Wanning shook her head. "All right, then take some of this change. At least you have some money when you need it." Zhouing handed her a purse after that. There wasn't much silver inside. It was all bits and pieces, adding up to at most 20 taels. "Thank you, sister." Yang Wanning took the purse and handed it to Chunzi. Later, the two of them went to the backyard to continue learning self-defense. On the other side, Yang Shiqing finally opened the city gates under pressure after running for 6 hours without discovering any clues. He returned home in a daze. After entering the door, he blacked out. Seeing this, the servant at the door jumped in fright and quickly shouted, "Master, master! Are you all right?" Yang Shiqing did not respond even after the servant shouted for a long time. Only when the 2 servants began to carry him did Yang Shiqing slowly open his eyes. However, there seemed to be something stuck in his throat. He couldn't say a word, and his eyes kept rolling back. When the 2 servants saw this, they were so frightened that they immediately got someone to carry a rack over. One servant sent him to the main courtyard, while the other guarded the door. When Mrs. Chui saw Yang Shiqing being carried back, she was so scared that her legs went weak. She quickly asked the servants what had happened. After getting an answer, Mrs. Chui more or less understood what had happened to Yang Shiqing and immediately sent someone to find a doctor. After the doctor came, he performed acupuncture on Yang Shiqing and gave him a prescription before waiting by his side. After that, Mrs. Chui only realized she needed to pay for his medical expenses. At that moment, the Yang family was so poor that they didn't even have a single copper coin. She said, "Doctor, do you mind if we pay in one settlement when the servants go over to get the medicine?" "All right." The doctor didn't overthink it. After all, a second-grade official wouldn't go so far as to avoid paying for his consultation fee. After she left, Mrs. Chui gathered the servants in the residence and said, "I won't say much about the situation that had happened. I heard that your silver wasn't stolen. Now, I need you to take out some of your silver to aid our situation. Of course, I won't take it for free. When we get through this, one will pay you back double." After saying that, she called the butler over and said, "Record in detail who paid how much." "Yes, madam." The butler responded and took out 20 taels himself. Since everyone saw that even the butler had offered some of his money, they had no choice but to offer some of theirs. Of course, there were also those who got greedy about the promise of doubling the amount of their silver and handed over everything they had. Chapter 5:17 Mrs. Cui's schemes after A4RS. Chui thanked everyone. She immediately asked the butler to take the silver to buy the medicine they needed. Madame Chui, who had rushed over after hearing the news, saw her son's pale face and lifeless body. She swayed and almost fell. Fortunately, she was supported by her maidservant, who was beside her. Seeing this, Mrs. Chui immediately went forward to help her sit down and said, "Mother-in-law, please relax. The doctor said that Shiqing's main problem is that his heart is weakening from shock. He has already undergone some acupuncture. What kind of sin do you think we've committed? Sigh, I wonder what's targeting us. Oh right, where are Wanning and Wanyu? Madame Chui asked. Their father had fallen ill in bed because of this family. Why aren't they here to even visit him? Wanyu is helping me to take stock of the losses in the residence. As for Wanning, I heard that she went out early in the morning. Mrs. Chui said. Vile, such a terrible thing happened at home, but she still has the mood to go out and play. Mrs. Chui's eyes flashed, and she spat with a sinister look. I guess she probably went to the Gu residence. She knew very well that even though the Yang family and their son had taken advantage of the Gu family, they had never truly accepted Mrs. Gu. Mrs. Gu was particularly despised by her aunt, Madame Chui. She had no kinship with Mrs. Gu and even deeply despised her. She hated Mrs. Gu for acting so high and mighty, as if she couldn't even bear looking at her for once. Another thing was that when Yang Shiqing was conferring the imperial mandate, he gave it to the Gu family to please them, and not his mother. It destroyed her dream of being the matriarch for many years, and she lost face in front of the other old ladies in the various residences. Therefore, as long as Mrs. Chui associated the Gu family with Yang Wanning, Madame Chui would definitely hate Yang Wanning even more. Sure enough, as soon as she finished speaking, Madame Cui's face immediately darkened. She growled, "Send someone to bring her back. How could a girl who's about to get married go out every day?" "Yes, I will send someone over now." Mrs. Chui smiled and sent someone to the Gu residence to look for Yang Wanning. Soon, the medicine was brought back, and Yang Shiqing woke up. After drinking the medicine, he lay on the bed and exhaled. It seemed that there was something stuck in his throat. "Son, even if we lose our wealth, we can slowly get it back. We still have our manors and shops, so we will be able to survive no matter what." Madame Chui said. "Yes, master. We can still withdraw some silver from the cloth shop. Don't be too worried." Mrs. Chui sure echoed, but she was also deeply anxious. Not only had they lost their family fortune, but they had also lost the betrothal gifts sent by the first prince. With the day of her daughter's wedding approaching, how could she get married in glory? The following days weren't looking good. Thinking of this, she started to curse Mrs. Gu. That's right, she assumed that the Yang residence had been emptied by Mrs. Gu, who had come to demand her life yesterday. Otherwise, who could take everything away without leaving a trace? However, this idea was too ridiculous. Even if she said it out loud, no one would believe her. At that moment, Yang Wanyu walked in with a bitter face and an account book. "Relax, how can I relax? Our residence has nothing but food now. What about my dowry? You couldn't possibly ask me to carry a few loads of grain over as my dowry." After saying that, she wiped her tears hurriedly and was deeply terrified. She probably couldn't even gather 6 sets of dowries with their situation. Chapter 518 Panic. At this moment, Yang Shiqing suddenly sat up and quickly walked toward Yang Wanyu. Then, under the shocked gazes of Mrs. and Madame Chui, he slapped Yang Wanyu more than 10 times in a row. Only when Yang Wanyu was screaming in pain did he stop and say, "Get out." "Son, master." The aunt and niece wanted to calm him down, but Yang Shiqing suddenly grabbed the cup on the table and threw it on the ground between them. The two women were shocked. However, when they saw Yang Shiqing's twisted face and bloodshot eyes, no one dared to calm him again. Instead, they quickly retreated out of the room. Even Yang Wanyu, who was wailing, immediately shut her mouth. After they left, Yang Wanyu held Mrs. Cui's arm and said, "Mom, why did Dad hit me? It hurts so much. He's in a bad mood now, so don't mention your dowry for the time being. It's better for you to quickly apply some medicine." Otherwise, your face won't recover in 10 days to half a month. Mrs. Chui looked at her daughter's gradually swollen face and said. Yang Wanyu got anxious when she heard that. She quickly ran back without even saying goodbye. Seeing this, Mrs. Chui sighed and caught up with Madame Chui, saying, Aunt, it's time for us to take the silver we left at home. Otherwise, I'm afraid Wanyu's dowry will. Although Madame Chui was reluctant, she thought of her anxious son and finally nodded. However, they did not know Yang Shiqing was not stressed because of the missing money or property. After all, he didn't care about that bit of wealth. He was anxious about the things in his secret room, especially the letters. Those were the many pieces of evidence of his corruption over the years. If it fell into the hands of someone with ill intentions, his future would be ruined, and he might even lose his life. On the other end, Zhou received the news that the Yang family was looking for Yang Wanning. She stopped their lessons and asked, Is there anything I can help you with? Yes. Yang Wanning hesitated for a moment and told her about Mrs. Chui loaning money and charging high interest rates through the Chui family. I'm afraid I won't be able to come out for a while when I return. But since we have no money anymore, Mrs. Chui will definitely ask for silver from the Chui family in order to prepare a dowry for Yang Wanyu. This is an excellent opportunity. Please tell the third prince that we must wipe out the Chui family in one fell swoop. But you will be implicated. I will break away from the Yang family as soon as possible. At that time, one might have to trouble you to take us siblings in for a while. Have you made up your mind? Yes, otherwise, who knows how would I died. All right, be careful. Zhou reminded her and sent her off. At the same time, she gave her some medicine and some knockout powder, just in case. After she left, Zhou drank a cup of water and then spread out her spiritual sense to look at the Yang family. She laughed when she saw Yang Wanyu, who was beaten up like a pig's head. When she learned from Yang Wanyu's complaints that Yang Shiqing hit her, she laughed even more. She quickly focused her attention on Yang Shiqing. Yang Shiqing had already calmed down after venting his anger and was writing furiously in his study. Zhou went over and took a glance. She thought he was asking his accomplice, the first prince, for help. She did not expect that he would instead submit a memorial to the throne, demanding strict management of the capital's public security. After writing the memorial, he went to the government office to deal with his documents as usual. Zhou couldn't help but sigh, what a strong heart he has. If it were anyone else, they would have to stay at home for a few days. Chapter 519 Shameless. Suddenly, Zhou remembered that Yang Shiqing still had a stack of silver left in his manor. It would likely not be transported back to the residence for a while. Then, Zhou would gladly accept it. She would find another suitable opportunity to deal a fatal blow to Yang Shiqing. She followed the address on the letter, found 10 silver boxes, and kept them away. At the same time, before she left, she realized that this manor was used as a breeding farm. There were not only chickens, ducks, geese, and other poultry, but also cattle, sheep, pigs, and other livestock. There were quite a number of them. She glanced at the surroundings, and as expected, there were 3 breeding farms, each bigger than the other. She even saw the unique pheasant she had given them as mother goddess back then. She had to find someone to ask around and see if she could buy a similar manor. It's so that she can maximize the profits of her restaurant in the future. On the other end, Yang Wanning went straight to the old madam to report her safety after returning to the residence. She then turned around and walked out. Stop right there. Madame Chui, who was lying on the soft couch, immediately sat up and shouted coldly. Does grandmother have any other instructions? Although Yang Wanning was a little impatient, she still stopped and turned her head to ask. Did you know that your father fainted from anxiety? I heard about it when one entered the residence. One was just about to go over and take a look. Madame Chui snorted. Such a major incident happened in the residence. Why did you go out so early in the morning? I went to look for my cousin-in-law. One heard that Qing Lin sent someone back to the residence to request food expenses yesterday. However, since that happened in our residence this morning, I had to borrow money for emergencies. Upon hearing that, Madame Chui glanced at her and asked, "How much did you borrow?" "Not much, only about 20 taels. But as long as Qing Lin uses it sparingly, it should be enough for a month." A month later, the shop would generate profits, and Qing Lin would no longer have to worry about his food expenses. 20 taels of silver, that little. After hearing that, young Wanning's eyes flashed a hint of sarcasm. Over the past few months, the Young family hadn't even given her allowance of IO taels of silver on time, and this old coot still had the cheek to say that 20 taels of silver were little. Besides, she had never heard of them giving any money whenever the Chui family came to eat. Young Wanning deliberately answered with a worried look, "You should know the situation of the Gu family. After entering the capital, they have spent a lot of money on many things. I am already grateful that they can lend me 20 taels of silver to tide over the difficulties." Madame Chui looked up at her thoughtfully. Why did she feel that Yang Wanning was acting differently today? She answered her every sentence, not giving in at all. Was she on the same side as the Gu family, or was she doing it purposefully? However, no matter the situation, it was not good for the Yang family. It seemed that she had to give Yang Wanning a lesson. "Don't forget, your surname is Yang, not Gu. In the future, your greatest reliance will still be the Yang family." "Yes, then you should rest, grandmother. I have to send food to Qing Lin later." "Wait, IO taels of silver a month is already enough for him to eat. Give me the rest. The residence doesn't have a single copper coin now." Yang Wanning secretly cursed her for being shameless. This was her emergency silver. She answered, "No, you also know that Qing Lin is used to spending money extravagantly. I'm afraid that what's wrong with the boy suffering a little? Besides, he's not young anymore. It's time for him to understand. No matter what happens, we'll set a monthly food allowance of IO taels of silver for him in the future." "Fine. Here." Yang Wanning quickly counted out 10 taels of silver and put them into her purse. She handed the rest to the old madam. Chapter 520 Snitching. After coming out, Chuanxi said indignantly, "The old madam is too annoying. She won't even let go of such a small amount of silver. Alright, stop talking. To begin with, she's a greedy person, so this was to be expected. Let's hurry up and show our faces in front of my father." After Yang Wanning finished speaking, she asked about the situation as she walked toward her father's courtyard. In the end, she realized that Yang Shiqing had already left. The two of them were just about to leave and give Yang Qinglin some money when they bumped into Mrs. Chui. Mrs. Chui interrogated her again and got the same answer. As for the fact that the Gu family was poor, she did not doubt it. After all, she had heard how badly the Gu family had been rated back then. However, when she saw Yang Wanning, she thought of an idea and asked, "Oh right, did you overhear from the Gu family when the third prince will offer your betrothal gifts? Your wedding date is not far away." Yang Wanning looked at her bright eyes and quickly understood what she was thinking. Mrs. Chui wanted to use her betrothal gift as Yang Wanya's dowry, which was shameless to the extreme. Thinking of this, she shook her head and replied, "I haven't heard of it. However, the third prince's main consort has yet to marry in. No matter what, I have to wait until the main consort is married for a full month before he has time to marry a secondary consort. There's no such thing. The earlier he sends the betrothal gift, the better it is. I can also prepare your dowry earlier." Yang Wanning's face instantly turned red after hearing that. However, it was not because she was embarrassed but because she was pissed. However, she pretended to be shy and said, This matter has to be discussed between you and father. After saying that, she turned around and ran out. Mrs. Chui didn't think much about it but was annoyed by Yang Wanning's lack of concern. However, she had to admit that Yang Wanning's concerns were valid and could only put them aside for the time being. Mrs. Chui then went to Cui's family after dinner. At night, in her interspace, Zhou told Gu Qingrui about the Chui family's participation in the business of loaning money and charging high interest rates. Do you think King Rui will interfere in this matter? With his personality, he might, but the consequences would be more detrimental than beneficial. We don't know if the Empress and her son are involved. If they clash in advance because of this, it won't be good for us. Gu Qingrui explained. He looked up at her and smiled dotingly. Oh, Mother Goddess, you can tell the Emperor about this. One don't think he will just stand by and do nothing. Would he care about such trivial matters? This is not a small matter. The country doesn't even legalize gambling, let alone loan sharks. Otherwise, the country would fall into chaos. Moreover, if it were Mother Goddess bringing it up, he would have to take it seriously on account of you. Alright, I'll give it a try. After saying that, Zhou went to get busy. After she was done, she gave the Emperor a dream and deliberately mentioned that many had died because of this. Zhou had just withdrawn her spiritual senses when the Emperor woke up. He looked at the dark sky outside and stared at it blankly. At the same time, he was a little excited. He didn't expect Mother Goddess to appear in his dreams. This led him to think that the Chui family had done something heinous, so he called Xiaoheng over and ordered him to investigate the Chui family's loan sharks in private. Although Xiaoheng was curious about how he knew about this, he did not ask further. He had heard rumors about it, so he personally left the palace and led his men to start investigating. Since Mrs. Chui was in a hurry to get more money, the Chui family was also acting far more boldly than before. This made it much easier for Xiaoheng to investigate. In the blink of an eye, it was the day of King Rui's wedding. Early in the morning, after confirming that the wedding envoy had set off, Zhou brought Haitang a wedding gift of 888 taels that she had prepared earlier. Chapter 521 Forcing their request, 1. Yang residence. After breakfast, Mrs. Chui looked at Yang Shiqing and asked, Master, have you considered what one told you last night? Wanya's dowry cannot wait. You have to make a decision quickly. Didn't you go to the Chui family? What did they say? Yang Shiqing hesitated and asked. He did not want to touch the betrothal gift of King Rui unless they were really at their wits' end. If word got out, where would his dignity be? The Chui family can only take out 30,000 taels of silver, which is not even half of the first prince's betrothal gift. 30,000, isn't that a little too little? If things really can't be rushed, just take back the original amount of money those people borrowed and forgo the interest. Regardless, we need to get our cash flow back. Mrs. Chui was unwilling to accept this. If they only asked for the original amount, she would lose at least 30% of her profit. However, it was true that they had to try to collect back as much of their cash flow as possible. She could only say, you have to think of a way to let Wanyu get married in a glorious manner. Why don't you tell Wanning and ask her to request the third prince for his betrothal gifts through the Gu family's madam? I can't afford to go to the Gu family and beg them, especially when they are both younger than me. Yang Shiqing turned around and walked out. Master. Mrs. Chui quickly stood up and shouted. However, not only did Yang Shiqing not stop, but he left as quickly as he could. Mrs. Chui was unwilling to accept his rejection because she knew the fastest way to get enough money was to get the betrothal gifts from King Rui. Otherwise, she could not gather enough money for her daughter's dowry. At the thought of this, she immediately got up, went to Madame Chui, and mentioned this to her. Madame Chui was also reluctant after hearing this. She could ignore Yang Wanning's life and death, but not her son's dignity. If news of this were to spread, would Yang Shiqing still have a foothold in the imperial court? However, when she thought of Yang Wanyu, she also remembered their true backer, the first prince. For a moment, Madame Chui struggled to make a decision. "Aunt, don't hesitate anymore. Once Yang Wanning marries off, it will be too late." Seeing that her aunt was still not relenting, Mrs. Chui urged her. "Why don't you call her over and ask her about it?" Madame Chui hesitated for a moment but eventually agreed. Mrs. Chui immediately sent someone to call Yang Wanning. At the same time, Yang Wanning, who was about to leave, also received news of this through her channels. After learning that Mrs. Chui had gone to look for Madame Chui, she smiled sarcastically. Mrs. Chui really loves her daughter. For Yang Wanyu, she dared to go against my father's wishes. "Miss, do you still have the mood to joke around? You should think about how to deal with this." Chuanxi shuffled her feet nervously. "Why should I deal with it? Since Mrs. Chui has repeatedly mentioned this matter, it seems that she has made up her mind about King Rui's betrothal gift. Why don't I push their boat to flow with the current and send her on her way? But, this way, your reputation will be ruined. It's not just my reputation that's affected. I'm sure the one who will be the most angry will be my father. What if the old master blames you? We have a shield." Yang Wanning had just ended her sentence when a series of footsteps could be heard. Chun-Shi was stunned for a moment but quickly understood what she meant and smiled. After the person came in and expressed his intention, Yang Wanning nodded and said, "Just in time. We have to pay our respects to the old madam. Let's hurry over." After saying that, she left her courtyard. After entering another courtyard, Yang Wanning glanced at the people present and bowed. "Greetings, grandmother, mother, Auntie Ning, Sister Wanyu, and Sister Wanru." "Have a seat," Madame Chui said. She looked at Madame Ning and said, "You and your daughter can go back now. We have something to talk about." She looked at Wanyu and said, "You go out too." Chapter 522 Forcing their request, 2, Sure. The three of them turned around and walked out. However, when she was about to leave, Auntie Ning turned her head and glanced at the three of them before walking out. After they left, Madame Chui said, "Wanning, you know our situation. Can you borrow some money from the Gu family to help us overcome our difficulties?" After Yang Wanning heard this, she replied with a troubled expression, "If grandmother is the one asking, one have no reason to refuse. But my cousin's foundation is too shallow, and they can only lend us another 8 or 10 taels of silver. It's just a drop in the ocean in our situation." She paused for a moment and continued, "Oh right, I heard that they have been looking to buy food supplies. Why don't we use the excess food we have to trade with them?" Madame Cu's mouth twitched. "It's not like you don't know how precious food is now. If we sell them our food, what will we eat? But they really, since it's that difficult, forget it. Oh, why don't you go through the Gu couple and ask them to remind King Rui to send his betrothal gifts in advance?" Yang Wanning wanted to say something, hesitated, and finally replied, "Mother did request me to do the same previously. However, His Highness had just gotten married today. In my opinion, he wouldn't send out my betrothal gifts within a month or perhaps before the new year." Mrs. Chui was afraid that Madame Chui would back off after hearing that, so she interrupted, "What's the big deal? It's just giving your betrothal gifts. It's not marrying you, so I'm sure it's fine." But Yang Wanning looked like she wanted to say something more but hesitated. When the old madam heard her say this, she knew that it was impossible for King Rui to send over Yang Wanning's betrothal gifts before Wanyu's wedding. She waved her hand. Just pass on the message. Whether it succeeds or not depends on His Highness. She got up after saying that. All right, go now. Go quickly so that you reach there before twilight. After saying that, the old madam walked out. On the other end, when Zhou arrived at the royal residence, she was surprised to find that the Empress Dowager and King Xian's consort were the ones entertaining the womenfolk. Of course, with them around, everyone else was much more careful when they spoke. Therefore, Zhou stepped forward, bowed, and planned to find a corner to sit in. However, the Empress Dowager waved at her before she could find a seat. Miss Zhou, come over here to my side. Yes, Empress Dowager. Zhou had no choice but to step forward with a smile. Oh, so you do know that I'm the Empress Dowager. A few days ago, at your housewarming party, why didn't you invite me? The Empress Dowager glared at her and asked her to sit beside her. Yeah, I heard their newly installed floor heater is especially warm. Oh, the hot pot is said to be so spicy and delicious that those who ate it could not stop. Consort Xian echoed. It's my fault. This commoner will send a portion to each of you after this. Zhou immediately stood up and apologized. Commoner. Didn't the emperor give you an imperial mandate? The Empress Dowager asked in surprise. I was raised among the servants since I was young, and I don't think I'm qualified to accept an imperial mandate. Zhou shook her head at that. Moreover, Gu Shengru's position in the government was still unstable, so it was expected that the emperor would not give her an imperial mandate. Besides, she didn't want it. If she were given an imperial mandate, it would limit her freedom. Thus, in order to prevent the Empress Dowager from interfering, she continued, the emperor is wise, and he must have his reasons for doing so. We will just listen to the emperor's arrangements. When the Empress Dowager heard her say this, she said nothing more. Instead, she said, the day after tomorrow, come to the palace. I would love to try your cooking. After saying that, she looked at Granny Lu. Granny Lu nodded and gave Zhou a token to enter the palace. After Zhou took it, she could only bow and reply, sure, one will remember it. After saying that, she retreated to the side. Chapter 523 Forced to stop after a while, Mingyu followed consort and in. With her company, Zhou finally had someone to chat with. Soon, someone from the Zhou family arrived, and it was only Madame Zhou. The two looked at each other, nodded politely, and then went about their things. Although everyone was curious about their attitudes toward each other, no one said anything when they remembered what had happened at the palace banquet. Next, the young family's group of 4 walked in. Everyone looked at them in surprise. Food was scarce these days, and every family would try their best to attend all kinds of banquets with as few people as possible. No one here expected that 4 of them would be attending this banquet. After they bowed to the Empress Dowager and sat down, someone asked curiously, Madame Yang, I heard your residence was robbed. Did you find any clues regarding the culprit? Not yet, but the government is helping us to investigate. Madame Cui replied with a dry smile. This is strange. You mentioned that so many things were stolen, yet none of you heard anything. Not really. Have you heard of the 5 ghosts manipulation technique? I heard that ghosts won't make a sound when moving things around. If they can't hear anything, someone should have at least seen something. The same is for Mother Goddess. Although she could put things down silently, there would always be something that could be seen or touched. Say, with so many patrolling your residence and so many servants on duty, how could no one notice anything when that many things are stolen? Yeah, everything about this is just strange. No matter how you think about it, it's just creepy. Madame Cui was disgusted after hearing this. What did they mean by saying their residence was strange? How could their residence be creepy? If this continued, everyone would probably think their residence was haunted. She quickly changed the topic and said, "Oh, right. When did the wedding envoy leave? Would they be back soon?" What she didn't know was that many people in the capital firmly believed that the young family's residence was haunted. Moreover, they must have done something wrong and were suffering retribution. Of course, some others felt that Yang Shiqing was just acting. Otherwise, how else would they explain that everything in their residence had been emptied overnight? This group of people included the emperor. The emperor had begun to suspect that he had taken many bribes and started investigating. "No, they won't be back that fast. Our two places are located at opposite ends of the city. At the very least, the envoy must traverse half the city." Consort Xian replied. The capital streets were particularly lively because the wedding envoy was forced to stop halfway. They were stopped because there were 5 strong men pulling on an old man and a young girl. The best man, Zhou Huaiming, quickly dismounted and walked over. "What's going on?" When the young girl saw Zhou Huaiming, she immediately turned around and kowtowed. "Sir, please save me. One don't want to get sold into a brothel." When she kowtowed and begged for mercy, the 5 men chasing her saw King Rui and the others on their horses. They looked at each other and turned to run. "Capture and detain them." Zhou Huaiming saw this and immediately ordered the officer who had rushed over. When the officer heard this, he chased after them. The two sides quickly fought, but only 2 of the 5 men were caught, and the rest ran away. Zhou Huaiming said to the young girl, "You two follow them to the government office. It'll go over in the afternoon." Before the young girl could return to her senses, the old man had already pulled her to the side. Zhou Huaiming saw that the path had been cleared, so he immediately got on his horse and continued their trip. Chapter 524 Envy. Just as it was getting late, the emperor and empress and the 4th prince's mother, consort Shu, rushed over. Everyone immediately went forward and bowed to them. Next was the wedding ceremony. Zhou Ying took the opportunity to take a good look at Sun Myok's wedding dress. It was a bright red dress with patterns of birds and beasts embroidered with gold thread. The back of the dress stretched out 6 feet long. Overall, it looked both stylish and beautiful, making her envious. Looking at the empress' luxurious attire, she finally understood why women fought so hard to attain a higher status. At least, they could dress better than others. First bow, to heaven and earth. Second bow, to your ancestor. Third bow, to each other. Head into your bridal chamber. The emperor looked at the backs of the newlyweds and laughed, "Ha ha ha, one have succeeded in completing another major milestone in my life. Congratulations to the emperor. Long live my emperor." Everyone immediately stood up and bowed to him. "Everyone, please rise. Today, I'm attending the wedding as a father. Let's all have a good drink." After saying that, the emperor looked at Butler Feng and said, "Let's begin the banquet." "Thank you, your majesty." Everyone stood up and bowed before taking their seats at the banquet. Zhou Ying and the other women returned to the backyard. After they sat down, Mingyul looked at Wanning and asked, "Wanning, what's wrong?" Young Wanning was surprised by the question. "Nothing. I just thought of something." "I see." Mingyu didn't ask any more. Yang Wanyu sneered at her, saying, "I'm sure she's just envious of Sun Myok's red wedding dress. As if you can wear it too." Yang Wanning replied unhappily. Yang Wanyu was about to retort when Yang Wanning shook her head. She added hesitantly, "I'm just worried about our dowries. Look at her 88 sets of dowries. One don't even know what you can gather when you get married at the end of the month." Yang Wanyu was so angry after hearing that she picked up the chopsticks in her hand and was about to hit Yang Wanning. Mingyu raised her head and pinched Yang Wanya's chopsticks with her fingers. Don't forget where we are. Yang Wanyu angrily glared at Mingyu, glared at Yang Wanning, and finally let go of her hand and changed tables. Mingyu smiled and shook her head when she saw this. She winked at Yang Wanning and said, "Well done, you finally know how to counterattack." Yang Wanning smiled silently at that. However, she couldn't feel happy even doing so. Because Wanyu was right, she was envious of the red wedding dress when she had to wear a pink one as the secondary consort. She also knew that she shouldn't have these feelings, but no matter what, she was envious. Zhou saw Yang Wanning's mind wandering off, and coupled with her reaction moments ago, she more or less guessed her thoughts. However, Tang Wanning had chosen her own path, and there was no way to retreat. She knew that she had to bite the bullet and rush forward from here on. Mingyu had the opposite thought. She felt that Yang Wanning was worried about her dowry. After all, the Yang family went broke, and she doubted if they could even take out a decent, sizable dowry. "Wanning, are you worried about your dowry?" Yang Wanning shook her head and replied, "I'm more worried about Wanya's dowry. Her wedding date is coming soon, but there's nothing in the residence that we can take out. When one came out today, my mother even asked me to borrow money from my cousin-in-law." "What are you saying? Even if they want to borrow money, they should borrow it from Wanya's mother's family. Why would they ask you to borrow money from Sister Zhou? Moreover, the dowry of a secondary consort is at least 80,000 taels of silver. Even if Sister Zhou and the others could take it out, they would have to empty their family's coffers. Why would they? I don't agree either. But now, she's having ideas about my betrothal gifts. She wants me to send a letter to King Rui through Brother Zhou to ask His Highness to send my betrothal gifts as soon as possible." Chapter 525 Egg Fried Rice 1. What? Are they shameless? Mingyu exploded when she heard that. Zhou Ying immediately tugged at her sleeve. Everyone who was eating immediately raised their heads and looked at Mingyu with gossipy faces. Seeing this, Mingyu smiled awkwardly and waved her hand. "Cough, cough, continue to eat and drink, we're just chatting." Seeing this, everyone did not ask any more questions and continued the banquet. Zhou Ying lowered her head and asked softly, "Wanning, what do you think? It would be best if the entire capital knew about it, but it can't be the three of us who spread it." Yang Wanning looked at Mingyu after she finished speaking. Mingyu's eyes widened when she heard that. She nodded in understanding and replied, "One understand." Soon after, Heartwarming accompanied King Rui and started toasting drinks. When it was their turn, Heartwarming said to Zhou Ying, "Sister-in-law, please come out when you're almost done eating." Zhou Ying nodded. After they left, she ate another piece of chicken, got up, and walked out. As soon as she reached the outside, she was stopped by a young eunuch. "Xiao Detzi greets Madame Gu. Please follow me." After saying that, he turned around and walked to the side. Zhou Ying hesitated for a moment and followed him. At the same time, she opened her spiritual senses to monitor her surroundings just in case. When they arrived at an empty space, Xiao Detzi said, "Madame Gu, please take the time to make a pot of egg fried rice. The Empress Dowager, the Emperor, and the Empress would like to taste your cooking." Zhou Ying was surprised to hear that. Since King Rui knew that they were coming, he would definitely prepare enough food for them. Why did they still want to eat egg fried rice? Xiao Detzi had met countless people since he was young, and he could guess what she was thinking at a glance. However, he could not say that the three were just craving to taste her cooking, so he could only cough and ask, "What do you need?" Zhou Ying hesitated momentarily before replying, "Let's go to the kitchen and look. Different ingredients will taste different. Please follow me." After Xiao Detzi finished speaking, he brought her to a big kitchen. When they arrived at the kitchen, most of the cooking had stopped, with only a few helpers still busy cleaning. Zhou glanced at the remaining ingredients in the kitchen. To be honest, there was barely anything. Fortunately, there was still pork fat, onions, carrots, eggs, and cold rice. She turned around and asked, "Do all 3 guests eat carrots?" "Yes, but you have to control the amount." "No problem, it's just for color." Zhou glanced at everyone in the kitchen and said, "However, just leave the helpers behind. The rest of them have to leave." Xiao Detzi nodded after hearing this and understood her concerns. He left behind a young boy stoking a fire and chased everyone out. Zhou quickly started preparing. First, she took a big, clean basin and scattered the cold rice before placing it in front of a stove. The hot wind would evaporate the water in the rice faster. Then, she cracked 6 eggs and added salt and a small amount of pepper to them. She cut up some green onions and small radishes for later use. Then, she prepared the pork fat that she needed. After preparing everything, she didn't hurry to stir-fry the rice. Instead, she waited for the rice to cool down completely. At the same time, Zhou prepared a simple thermal container. It was made simple by putting hot water in the bottom container and the egg-fried rice on top. After ensuring the cold rice was no longer sticky, she asked the helper to make the fire bigger. First, she poured a large spoonful of pork fat, followed by the eggs. Before the eggs could solidify, she quickly poured in the cold rice. Then, she used a spatula to quickly stir-fry the rice until every grain was covered with a layer of egg. After the rice was heated, she added the chopped green onions and carrots and quickly stir-fried them. Chapter 526 Egg Fried Rice 2. A moment later, the rich scent of eggs mixed with rice wafted over, causing Xiao Detzi, who was standing nearby, to swallow his saliva. The young helper who was stoking the fire was stunned when he saw the golden egg-fried rice. He had never known that fried rice could be eaten this way. However, Zhou did not have the time to pay attention to them. She quickly took out a huge bowl, scooped all the egg-fried rice into it, and immediately put it into the thermal container. Finally, she picked up the box and asked Xiao Detzi, "Do we need to prepare smaller bowls and spoons? If not, we can leave." "No need, no need. Everything is ready over there." Xiao Detzi responded, then quickly brought her to the main courtyard. "That's right." For the sake of safety, King Rui arranged for the emperor and the others to sit at a separate table in the main courtyard. There were also people guarding the entrance. When the 2 of them went in, they were checked to make sure that they had no weapons before they were let in. After entering the house, the Empress Dowager stopped Zhou from bowing, saying, "Forget the pleasantries and please hurry up serving the egg-fried rice." "Yes." Zhou responded, then went forward to open the thermal container. After placing the bowl of egg-fried rice on the table, she retreated to the side and waited. "Not bad, not bad. It's indeed very fragrant, and the color is also beautiful." The Empress Dowager nodded in satisfaction. Yes, her cooking is not inferior to the imperial chefs in the palace. The Emperor nodded in agreement. Although the Empress didn't like Zhou, she had to admit that her cooking was excellent. She immediately asked her personal palace maid to test for poison with a silver needle. After confirming there was no problem, the palace maid immediately scooped a small bowl for each of them. The 3 immediately picked up their spoons and started eating. In a short while, everyone finished their small bowl. The emperor nodded in satisfaction and said, "Xiao Detzi, reward." "Thank you, Your Highness. This commoner will take her leave." Zhou quickly stepped forward and said, Remember to come to the palace to make hot pot the day after tomorrow." The emperor nodded and reminded Zhou. Zhou immediately retreated after hearing that. Xiao Detzi chased after her and handed over 2.5 gold nuggets. This is the Emperor's reward. Thank you. Zhou Ying thanked him politely, accepted the reward, and turned to leave. When she returned to the banquet, it was almost over. Only Mingyu and Yang Wanning were still waiting inside. Seeing her coming back in, Mingyu immediately asked, "What did Zhou Huiming ask you to do? What took you so long?" Zhou Ying didn't hide anything from them and told them about the egg fried rice. When Mingyu heard that, she remembered the hot pot from the other day and immediately said, "Sister Zhou, I want to eat egg fried rice tonight too." Zhou Ying shook her head. "Let's just stir-fry some dough. We don't have any good rice, and lower-grade rice won't taste good either." Haitang and her husband were familiar with the ingredients available in the manor, so Zhou Ying did not dare take out any of her rice from her interspace. "I have some at home. 111 Get someone to send it over later." Mingyu replied. "Alright, don't mind if I use up all of it." Seeing that she could not refuse, Zhou Ying had no choice but to agree. She looked at Yang Wanning and said, "Come with us tonight. I'll send someone to escort you back after dinner." "Perfect, then I won't stand on ceremony." After that, the three of them returned to Zhou Ying's residence. After Zhou Huiming finished his meal, he said to Gu Qingrui and Yang Ziping, the son of King An, "You two continue. I have to interrogate a criminal." "A criminal?" Yang Ziping asked. Zhou Huiming didn't hide anything and told them someone had bumped into and stopped the wedding envoy earlier. When Yang Ziping heard this, he knew it was being taken seriously, not because of the incident itself but because of its implications. Gu Qingrui naturally knew this as well. The two of them asked at the same time, "Do you need help?" Chapter 527 The End of the Chui Family. 1. I can handle this small matter for now. You guys should stay behind and help King Rui send the guests off. Zhou Huiming then stood up and walked out. He could not let the two of them get too close to him and King Rui for now. Otherwise, they would also be in danger. Gu Qingrui and Yang Ziping looked at each other and got up to get busy. Zhou Huiming had found the camp of the patrolling soldiers in the eastern city and the old man and his granddaughter, who had been bullied. Before he could speak, the girl knelt down and begged, "Please save us. Please, get up. I'm here to deal with this matter." After Zhou Huiming finished speaking, he invited the two of them to sit down and asked, "Have you two eaten?" "Yes, the officials here gave us a bowl of flour paste each," the old man replied. "That's great. Please, tell me what happened. Who are those people who threatened to sell your granddaughter?" "The leader who captured us is called Brother Hu, and he's someone who is in charge of giving out and collecting back tokens." "Tokens?" "Yes, tokens. When winter came, my son caught a cold and fell ill. However, all the valuables we had were exchanged for food. We had no choice but to borrow 10 taels of silver for 3 months with a 30% interest rate, represented by those tokens. Unfortunately, my son still didn't get well. My son had just passed the 7th day when they came for us. It hasn't even been 3 months since winter. Do you know why they are suddenly in a rush to collect the money? I'm not clear about this, but from what they said, it seems that their master is in urgent need of silver. This is why they are in a hurry to recover their capital. They even said that the interest could be reduced by half. But in our family, only the two of us are worth some money, so, short of silver. Someone who is in the loan shark business is short on silver." Zhou Huiming had thought of the Yang family when he said this, as they were the only ones really short of money. "Do you know who the person behind them is?" "I'm really not sure about that. We just borrowed the money from Brother Hu." "Are you sure what you've said is true?" "I'm sure. If I tell a lie, 111 be struck by lightning and die a horrible death." Me too. Everything we said is true. Alright, you two wait here for a while. I'll be right back. After Heartwarming finished speaking, he went to look for the two people who had been caught earlier. Ultimately, he was told that the two of them had run away. After Heartwarming heard this, he stared at the soldier in front of him with a sharp gaze and asked, "Are you sure they ran away on their own and not because you let them go?" "General Zhou, they really ran away while we were eating," the soldier replied in fear. "Are you all good for nothings? It's fine if you didn't catch them all, but how could you lose the ones we caught? One think it's time for you to remove your uniform." Heartwarming turned around and walked out immediately after. However, after taking 2 steps, he stopped and commanded, "What are you waiting for? Get your people to spread out and look for those people." "Yes, yes. 111 get right to it." The soldier saluted and quickly ran off. Heartwarming sent the 2 victims back home, and at the same time, he had 2 subordinates temporarily protect their safety. He turned around and went to the admiral's office. He wanted to see who had the guts to dabble in the loan shark business in the capital. Lord Yen saw Heartwarming coming over in a huff and stood up in a daze. "Nephew Zhou, aren't you accompanying the 3rd prince in hosting the banquet?" Chapter 528 The End of the Chui Family. 2. Sorry to disturb you, Uncle Yen, but one have a favor to ask. Heartwarming cupped his fists and bowed. "Oh, do tell." Lord Yen asked him after he sat down. Heartwarming didn't stand on ceremony and told him how the wedding envoy had been forced to stop. Fi continued, "One feel that there was something fishy about this matter, so I wanted to find those people and their master." After hearing this, Lord Yen felt that Heartwarming was making a mountain out of a molehill. After all, it was not uncommon for people to loan out high-interest loans, especially since the past few years have seen so many natural disasters. However, these were usually done by people at the lower end of society and could not cause any problems at large. However, when he thought of Sun Miaoka, he honestly felt a little guilty. In addition, they were relatives, so he decided to investigate and see if someone was behind this. Thus, he replied, "All right, I'll give the order to look for the person. Are you going to wait here for the news, or, if there is something, let me know at King Rui's residence? One have to return there now." "All right, I'll send someone to inform you when I catch the person." After Lord Yen finished speaking, he called someone in. Meanwhile, Heartwarming stood up, bid farewell, and returned to King Rui's residence. 4 hours later, Lord Yen sent someone to deliver a letter. However, only Brother Hu and the other 2 were captured, with the other 2 already dead. Heartwarming was even more certain that someone was up to something. He informed King Rui of this and rushed to the admiral's office. When Lord Yen, who was waiting in the room, saw him enter, he immediately led him to the cell. "Brother Hu and the other 2 are quite stubborn. I'm afraid we won't be able to get anything out of them. Where are the bodies of the other 2? I've temporarily placed it in the government office, but I've already informed the family members to come and get them. Don't let them take it away first and carry it directly to the prison cell. It might be useful." Lord Yen shook his head. "I'm afraid it's useless. We've tried." "Is that so? It looks like they're really stubborn. I'll meet them." Heartwarming quickened his pace after he finished speaking. When he arrived at the cell, he saw Brother Hu and the other 2 still hanging on the rack, covered in blood. Heartwarming went forward to check them out. He's really a tough guy, enduring such a serious injury and still not making a sound. When he saw some alcohol beside him, he picked it up and poured it directly on their wounds. As expected, the 3 of them immediately screamed in pain. Seeing this, Zhou Huaiming walked up to the person screaming the loudest and said, "I believe you have seen the corpses of your two companions. However, they are much luckier than you. At least they can still leave a corpse behind, but you might not be so lucky. If you want to kill or cut me up, do it. If one frown, it'll be your grandson. Don't. I don't want a grandson like you. I'm afraid that the coffin of my ancestor will pop out, and they will slap me for having such an unfilial grandson." One heard from a friend that there's a punishment called the tiger stool, which is simple and effective. Well, then, I can finally try it out with you guys. After Zhou Fluaming finished speaking, he asked the guard to bring a chair, a stool, 4 ropes, and some bricks. After they were ready, they began instructing the guards on how to use it. When they had just added 2 bricks, the arrogant, hardy man had turned pale and terrified. Zhou Fluaming saw this and asked, "How does it taste?" "Have another brick. Want to see how many bricks you can take." Don't. What do you want to know?" 111 tell you." The man cried with an aggrieved expression. Chapter 529 The End of the Chui Family. 3. Brother who panicked and immediately yelled, "You coward, do you have any backbone?" Without waiting for Xiaoya, the interrogated man, to speak, Zhou Huaiming sneered, "Yo," as expected of their leader. "So you think you can endure this? Come, let's see how many bricks you can take." Xiaoya looked at Brother Hu expectantly. He wanted to let his leader have a taste of this tiger stool and see if he would still be able to stay quiet. The guards immediately changed Brother Hu into the contraption excitedly. If the effect were good, it would save them a lot of effort when interrogating other criminals in the future. After Brother Hu was tied up, the guards didn't wait for Zhou Huaiming's instructions and directly threw 2 bricks at him. Brother Hu immediately broke out in a cold sweat from the pain. This simple and crude interrogation method was really killing him. Zhou Huaiming saw this and laughed gloatingly. "Add another piece. He's the leader, ain't it? 2 bricks are too little for someone like him." The guard immediately added another brick. This time, Brother Hu couldn't hold on anymore and screamed in pain. He could even feel that his leg was about to break. He kept struggling, and when the rope was pulled to its limit, Brother Hu finally heaved a sigh of relief. "I'm impressed, what a man of steel. Let's add another brick." Zhou Huaiming gave Brother Hu a thumbs up. The guards moved again, but it was getting difficult to add the brick this time. Brother Hu also felt that his leg would break if this brick were added. It would be broken by pure force. Just thinking about it made his scalp tingle. After hesitating momentarily, he shouted, Stop adding. Ill talk. Lord Yen, who was watching the show with his hands behind his back, said, "It looks like this tiger stool is much more effective than whipping." Zhou Huaiming smiled and asked the people to start recording his statement. With Brother Hu's agreement, the interrogation was quick. In a short while, they had revealed everything they knew. However, they did not say it was the Yang family. Instead, they gave up a person called Master Wen. Lord Yen immediately sent someone to invite Master Wen over. After going through the tiger stool, Master Wen confessed quickly. Not only did he admit that he had spent money to save the 2 men captured earlier, but he also confessed that his higher-ups were the Chui family. In the end, Lord Yan ordered his subordinates to hand Master Wen to the Ministry of Justice. They quickly pounced on the Chui family after that. After receiving a tip, the Chui family was about to escape but was blocked. Zhou Huaiming brought them directly to the Ministry of Justice. In order to survive, the Chui family had no choice but to give up the Yang family's Madam and Mrs. Chui. King En, the Minister of Justice, who had mentally prepared for this, immediately dispatched someone to the Yang residence to arrest them. By the time Yang Shiqing received the news, it was already a foregone conclusion. However, for the sake of Yang Shiqing's safety and to leave a way out for themselves, the two women did not choose to out him. However, King An only sneered at their stubbornness. He did not believe that just these two women could run such a major operation. At the same time, Zhou told Gu Qingrui about Yang Wanning's intention. After Gu Qingrui, King Rui, and Zhou Huaiming discussed it, King Rui ordered the servants of his royal residence to spread the news that the Yang family was pressing for his dowry. Therefore, the next morning, Yang Shiqing was suspended by the emperor for failing his duty. After leaving the palace, Yang Shiqing once again faced everyone's contempt and disdain. The moment he found out what was happening, he almost exploded in anger. When Yang Shiqing returned home, Yang Wanyu, who was waiting at the door, immediately rushed over and asked, "Father, have you asked King An about grandmother and mother? When can they be released?" Yang Shiqing looked at her and didn't answer her question. Instead, he asked, "Did your mother ask Yang Wanning to request King Rui's dowry in advance?" Chapter 530 The End of the Chui Family, 4. I only heard about it this morning. Yang Wanyu's expression froze for a moment, and then she clasped her fingers uneasily. Yang Shiqing looked at her guilty look and replied coldly, "Since you know, why didn't you stop it? Our family isn't at the end of its rope, no. How much more of my dignity do you want to ditch?" But, Yang Shiqing laughed and said, "What do you think you are doing? All you want is to gather your dowry and to get married in glory." He gave her a hard slap and continued, "I'm ruined. If you still want to get married, go marry a tramp." After saying that, he went straight to Yang Wanning's small courtyard. After entering the courtyard, he saw Yang Wanning embroidering and stepped forward to kick her. Yang Wanning had noticed him when he entered, so she did not dodge when she saw him kicking her, but she was not stupid enough to take the kick directly. She purposefully moved backward when he kicked her to lessen the force of the blow, but she nonetheless fell to the ground. Then, she looked at him with an aggrieved expression and asked, "Father, what happened? Why are you kicking your daughter? You're not my daughter, and one don't have a stupid daughter like you." When Yang Wanning heard this, she understood that her cousin had settled their plan. She was elated but still asked with a blank expression, "Where do you get this from? Let me ask you, did you ask King Rui for his betrothal gift in advance through Gu Qingrui?" Yang Wanning acted stunned, bit her lip, and hesitated to speak. "Yes, but I didn't want to, but grandmother." Yang Shiqing understood immediately that it must have been Madame Chui who pressured Yang Wanning to do this. Thinking of this, he harbored hatred for Madame Chui. She knew how much he had suffered over the years for his reputation. However, because of a few words from her niece, Mrs. Chui, she disregarded her son's reputation for Yang Wanyu's dowry. Again, he berated Yang Wanning in a bad mood, saying, "Are you stupid? What will King Rui think of you in the future? Didn't you always ask us to listen to grandmother? Do you know that the betrothal gift is for Wanyu as her dowry?" "I know." "Then why did you? Hasn't my mother always been the head of the family? Didn't my mother's dowry fall into the hands of her and my grandmother? Qinglin and I only want to grow up safely." When Yang Wanning said this, a hint of mockery flashed in her eyes. Although Yang Shiqing didn't see her mocking gaze, he could tell from her tone that she was resentful. He narrowed his eyes and said, "So you went with the flow? Why didn't you ask for my opinion first? Ever since the Gu family was raided, have you even listened to us once? You even ignored my mother's requests before she passed away. Do you think I would still look for you?" A sharp glint flashed across his eyes after Yang Shiqing heard her dissatisfaction and hatred. He then asked, "So you aren't even considering your future? If you do this, you'll be looked down upon by others in the future. King Rui wouldn't be so superficial." Besides, the clothes Mrs. Chui prepared for me during the palace banquet had already exposed my status in the family. Do you think he wouldn't know of this? You, big sister, how can you talk to father like that? Yang Wanyu walked over and gloated. At least, better than you. For the sake of a grand marriage, you ignored our family's current situation and ruined everything. Yang Wanning turned her head and mocked. Yang Wanyu heard her words and immediately remembered the slap she had just received. She immediately panicked and retorted, "You're talking nonsense. What does this have to do with me? Those things were all orchestrated by mother." Chapter 531 The End of the Chui Family. 5. You're such a good daughter. If it weren't for your complaining, would mother be worried? If she wasn't in a hurry, would she force me to beg for my betrothal gift? Would she think of desperate ways to recover the money? Now that grandmother and mother have been arrested, you've pushed away all responsibility. Do you still have any conscience? I'll fight it out with you. Yang Wanyu shouted indignantly and rushed toward her. Yang Wanning didn't shirk and grabbed Yang Wanyu's wrist. She pressed her down and said, "How dare you refuse to admit responsibility? Who's the one who keeps asking for her dowry every day? Let go of me. I was never a part of this." Yang Wanyu struggled and shouted. "You know very well whether or not you were a part of this." Yang Shiqing looked at them arguing and shouted, "All right, all of you shut up. Look at how you are acting. Did you forget you are ladies from a noble family?" After saying that, he turned around and walked out. At the same time, he was highly disappointed in Yang Wanyu. Just like Yang Wanning had said, no matter what, her mother and Madame Chui were sent to prison because of her. Not only did she not feel guilty, but she also pushed all her responsibilities away. Would he be able to rely on such a daughter in the future? When he passed the garden, he saw the servants chatting in groups. He immediately went to the butler and scolded, "If they want to continue working, work as they should. Get lost, otherwise. This old servant will definitely manage them better." The butler immediately replied carefully, "If there's a next time, one won't let this go so easily." Yang Shiqing returned to the study after saying that. The butler touched his forehead and muttered, "Sigh, I guess it's up to me to take all that pent-up anger away." Although he was unhappy, he still gathered the servants together and gave them a round of instructions. Yang Shiqing thought about it and felt he should visit Mrs. Chui, especially his mother. Otherwise, he would be criticized by others for being unfilial. He changed into his regular clothes. At the same time, he asked the maidservants to pack some cotton clothes and blankets. He then carried the clothes directly to the Ministry of Justice to see if he could get at least one of them out of prison. After learning of his intentions, King An shook his head. "You've already been suspended. Don't get involved in this matter. I can't make any decision on this. Let's just wait for the Emperor's judgment." Then, can I go in and send them some cotton clothes?" "This is fine." King An nodded and stood up, asking his attendant to bring Yang Shiqing to the prison cell. Yang Shiqing was shocked by the cold air inside when they entered the cell. He couldn't help but shiver. At the same time, he was secretly glad that he had brought some cotton clothes and blankets for them. Otherwise, it would be uncertain if they could even come out alive. He walked to the door of the prison cell where the two women were. He then saw the two of them shivering under one blanket through the bars. "Mother, your son is here to see you." When the aunt and niece heard his voice, they immediately turned their heads. After confirming that it was him, Mrs. Chui immediately helped Madame Chui up and walked over happily. "Master, you're finally here to pick us up. I can't free you two for the time being, but I've brought you some cotton coats and blankets." Yang Shiqing pointed at the two big bags the prison guard had brought over after checking. What do you mean? Didn't we confess? Madame Chui grabbed the bars and asked anxiously. Yes, master, the Chui family has been raided, and all the silver has been confiscated. Mrs. Chui echoed. This matter has to wait for the emperor's decision. I've already been suspended from my position. Young Shiching shook his head. At that moment, the warden opened the cell door and threw 2 bags in. This problem of yours has blown up, and because of this, the 3rd prince's wedding has been disrupted. After saying that, he locked the door and looked at Yang Shiching. Lord Yang, you only have 15 minutes. After saying that, he turned around and left. Chapter 532 The End of the Chui Family, 6. How could this be? Madame Chui panicked and shouted, Son, you must save me. I'll do my best. Take care of yourselves here for the next few days. Sigh, we will. Mrs. Chui grabbed Yang Shiching's clothes and pulled him over. She whispered in a panic, Master, Master, she's back. She's here to take revenge on us. If she hadn't stolen all the valuable things in our family, all these things wouldn't have happened at once. What do you mean? Are you saying that Gu Qingrui is the culprit? Yang Shiching asked in surprise. He believed that Gu Qingrui had deliberately spread the news that they wanted dowries from the 3rd prince. However, he didn't believe that Gu Qingrui was the person who robbed them. He didn't have the ability to do so, not even the 3rd prince. No, it's Mrs. Gu. Mrs. Chui then told him about how Mrs. Gu attempted to kill her. She added, Originally, I wanted to invite a monk over to suppress her soul, but I didn't expect. Before she could finish her sentence, Yang Shiching stopped her and said, What nonsense are you talking about? It's just a dream. Many people in this world have done worse acts, but since when have the dead taken revenge on the living? It was simply nonsense. Master, it's true, it's true. After Mrs. Gu came to me, our residence was robbed the next morning. You have to believe me. Mrs. Chui tried persuading him. Son, it's better to believe it than not. Madame Chui echoed. Then, she remembered Yang Wanning's abnormality and said, Yang Wanning, too. Ever since the Gu family came, she's not as obedient as before. Why isn't she? Didn't she follow your instructions yesterday and ask for her betrothal gift from King Rui in advance? Otherwise, this wouldn't have spread like wildfire and made me a laughing stock. What do you mean? Although Yang Shiching was getting impatient, he still explained it to them a few times. She did it on purpose. She must have done it on purpose. Otherwise, with the relationship between King Rui and Gu Qingrui, how could it have been spread? There are many kinds of swordless battles in the imperial court. Since you have revealed your hand, how can you expect it not to be used against you? After Yang Shiching finished speaking, he gave them a few more instructions before turning around and walking out. And, what should we do now? Mrs. Chui looked at Yang Shiching's back and asked anxiously. Shiching's official position has been suspended. What can we do? Madame Chui sagged and seemed to have instantly aged by more than 10 years. She knew very well that if even her son were suspended, the emperor would only be more ruthless toward the Chui family. She regretted everything, especially her greed. Otherwise, they wouldn't have ended up in this miserable state. How would she face the ancestors of the Chui family after she passed? Just the thought of it made her scalp numb. After Yang Shiching returned to the residence, he still felt that it was better to believe Mrs. Cui's ramblings than not. Therefore, he decided to hire a monk to suppress the soul of Mrs. Gu in her coffin so that she would never be able to reincarnate. He went straight to Mrs. Cui's room and took all her silver, surprised to find there were only less than 200 taels of silver. Ultimately, he even took out the title deeds of all the shops from the family's assets. Because he was afraid that someone was watching him, he did not dare touch the money in the manor. However, when he took out the title deed of the shops, he almost fainted from anger because the manor and shops were now under Yang Wanya's name. Chapter 533. Asking for help. Yang Shiqing didn't know whether to laugh or cry at this. Cui, you're such a good mother. If you weren't caught, would you have emptied the Yang family for that ingrate, Yang Wanyu? So, just in case, he kept everything away and placed it in a secret compartment inside his study. Of course, he wouldn't give Yang Wanyu a single cent as her dowry. He would just give her an ordinary manor and shop. As for the rest, he planned to ask the first prince to take back the 100,000 taels of silver from the manor and exchange it for some cloth and jewelry for her dignity. He didn't have any other way now. Thinking of this, he packed up his things and turned around to rush to the residence of Prince Hui. On the other end, after approving the memorial in the palace, Prince Hui and Prince Kong walked out together. After they came out, Prince Kong stepped forward and said, "Eldest brother, one heard that the Yang family is asking for betrothal gifts from third brother in advance to prepare dowry for your concubine. What a great idea they have. Spending third brother's money for another of his daughter's dowry, your father-in-law sure is smart." How could Prince Hui not hear the sarcasm in his brother's words? Although he was unhappy, he still turned his head and smiled. "Why, fourth brother, if you're envious, I might also add some dowry for your consort. There's really no need. Although my in-laws aren't very rich, we can still afford the dowry." At this point, Prince Kong feared the first prince would turn hostile and immediately added, "Sorry, one got to go. One have to go back and prepare my betrothal gifts." After saying that, he strode towards the palace gates. Prince Hui was furious when he saw this. At the same time, he was also disgusted by Yang Shiqing. It seemed that he had to find a successor as soon as possible, as he could not watch as the lucrative position of the Ministry of Revenue fell into the hands of others. As soon as he entered the house, he heard his gatekeeper report, "Your Highness, Lord Yang Shiqing is waiting for you in the living room." Did he say anything? No, but he looks like he has something on his mind. Got it. After Prince Hui finished speaking, he thought of the upcoming marriage and hesitated for a moment before walking over. When Yang Shiqing saw him come in, he immediately stood up and said, "This lowly official greets your highness. There's no need to be so polite. Sit." Prince Hui brushed Yang Shiqing's bow away and walked straight to the seat of honor to sit down. After drinking a cup of tea, he asked, "Lord Yang, why are you here?" "I do have a small matter to discuss." After Yang Shiqing finished speaking, he looked at the maidservant standing at the side. Prince Hui understood his intentions and waved his hand to instruct her to leave. Yang Shiqing then told him his plan. When Prince Hui heard that it was because of Yang Wanya's dowry, he immediately got angry and asked, "Is the rumor in the morning true? Did you really ask for betrothal gifts from my third brother? It was this lowly official's fault. This matter was arranged by my wife, and I really didn't know beforehand." When Prince Hui heard this, he slammed the table angrily and scolded, "Don't know this, don't know that. You just don't know anything, be it your daughter's dowry or the loan shark business the Cui family is doing. Why do one feel that the one in charge of the Yang family is your wife and not you?" Yang Shiqing immediately lowered his head and did not dare to reply. When Prince Hui saw this, he was furious. However, when he thought of the evidence in his hands, he could only say, "I will help you gather 30 sets of dowry, and I won't be able to take out any more. As for the silver, you should keep it for yourself. Just buy something for your residence. I'm afraid I'm being watched now, so it's inconvenient for me to go and get it." Yang Shiqing hesitated and replied. Hearing this, Prince Hui was shocked and asked softly, "Did you burn all the letters we exchanged previously?" Is the silver safe? Chapter 534. A husband and wife getting along. Yang Shiqing's heart skipped a beat after hearing his question. In order to save his life, he could only brace himself and nod. Don't worry, I've destroyed all the letters after reading them. As for the silver, I've placed it in a fake decorated mountain. But, it's not the time to use it now. Prince Hui believed him when he heard that because he had never seen him touch the silver he gave him. He replied, how about this? I will lend you 50,000 taels of silver. Remember to return it. Thank you for your consideration, Your Highness. Yang Shiqing hurriedly bowed. Although 50,000 taels of silver was not a lot, it was enough to solve his urgent need. Follow me. After Prince Hui finished speaking, he brought him to his treasury and asked the butler to bring him 50,000 taels of silver. Yang Shiqing took it and thanked him. He did not stay for long and immediately turned around to leave. After returning home, he immediately slumped into his bed. Because he didn't know how long the lie he made up could last. He didn't know who had the gold, silver, and letters. Would that person bring his death to him? King Rui listened to Guard Chu's report on Yang Shiqing's whereabouts. When he heard that the first prince had lent Yang Shiqing 50,000 taels of silver, he said, keep an eye on Yang Shiqing. We might be able to dig out more dirt on him. Yes, but what about Miss Yang? We don't have to worry about this. Gu Qingrui will handle it well. Roger that. As soon as Guard Chu left, Qing Tao knocked on the door and came in. This servant Qing Tao greets Your Highness. Princess Consort requested that I come to ask if you want to have lunch together. I'll go over after I'm done with my work, replied King Rui hesitantly. Yes. Qing Tao responded and turned to leave. Rui Wang was no longer in the mood to read more official documents and sat down to drink a cup of tea. He went out for a walk and went to the side hall before heading straight to the main courtyard. Sun Miaoke was sorting out her dowries in her room when she saw him coming in. She immediately came up to him and greeted King Rui politely. Welcome, Your Highness. King Rui looked at her awkward walking posture, and his heart softened. He helped her up and replied, there's no need to be so polite. Thank you. I had someone prepare 2 meat dishes and 2 servings of vegetables, as well as a bowl of chicken soup. Is there anything else you want to add? No, your arrangements are good. After King Rui finished asking, he asked, are you getting used to living here? If you need anything, you can tell me. If I'm not around, you can go to Uncle Feng too. There's no need, as everything is well prepared. It's just that the room is hot and dry, so I'm not used to it for now. King Rui was stunned for a moment after hearing this. After all, he had only returned home to sleep at night and never felt any discomfort. He then replied, you can go to the kitchen and tell Madame Feng to turn off the fire during the day. Also, if it gets too dry, you can get her to place a basin of water in the courtyard. We can control the temperature. Of course, as long as the fire doesn't go out. Otherwise, it would be troublesome if the heated floor cracked from the cold. I understand. One heard from the servants that the heated floor was built according to the one in Lord Gus' residence. That's right. The Gu couple is quick-witted, and always fortunate. If there's a chance, can get to know them more. King Rui nodded and added on. I see. Sun Miaoke nodded firmly. Soon, the dishes were served, and the two of them sat down to eat. For a moment, there was only the sound of chewing in the room, and both of them got slightly embarrassed. At that moment, King Rui suddenly thought about how Gu Qingrui and his wife got along. He picked up a piece of cumin mutton that Sun Miaoke could not reach and said, Come, try this cumin mutton and see if you like it. Cumin is an herb that my cousin got from the Gu family. Chapter 535. What a disaster. Sun Miaoka was surprised. She bit her chopsticks and replied with a blush, "Thank you, Your Highness." At the same time, she was surprised and relieved. What surprised her was that she never expected him to serve her food personally. She was relieved he wasn't as cold as he looked on the surface, which gave her confidence in this marriage. King Rui nodded and did not reply. Instead, he stretched out his hand to reach for a steamed bun. Sun Miaoka hurriedly called out to him, "Let me." After saying that, she brought the plate of steamed buns to him. King Rui picked one up and placed it inside his bowl, lowering his head to eat. The two of them didn't talk much after that, but they took care of each other, more or less. The two of them got along quite well. When Qing Tao saw this, she immediately walked out in the name of serving chicken soup. When she left the courtyard, tears flowed down uncontrollably. Honestly, she had always thought that her young miss could not let go of her cousin and would never get close to His Highness. It seemed that she was overthinking. In the palace, after the emperor finished the barely satisfactory egg fried rice made by the imperial chef, he asked, boldly, "Is Xiaoheng back?" Not yet, but this old servant heard Chief Xiao mention he was going to the suburbs to look for the victim. The victim? Yes, it said that many people died because of the Cui family's loaning business. What a disaster. The emperor laughed mockingly at himself. Even the emperor, when the situation was at its worst 2 years ago, did not exploit the people. He even had to limit himself to 1 meat and 1 vegetable per meal. Instead, the Cui family dared to amass wealth wantonly. Unforgivable. He had to teach these servants of his a good lesson and make an example out of them. The emperor spoke up, "Keep an eye on them. If Xiaoheng comes back, tell him to come see me as soon as possible." Yes, this old servant will remember it. After Eunuch Li finished speaking, he retreated to the side. The emperor got up and went back to the side hall to rest. They waited until the night before Xiaoheng returned. He handed a thick stack of confessions to the emperor. "Your Majesty, I have already investigated the Cui family's crimes. Over the past 5 years, 368 civilians have died from loans from the Cui family. Over 1,000 girls were sold to the Red Chamber or elsewhere. Many also had their families broken up and their wives and children separated. Their total earnings over the years total about 150,000 silver. So, not only are they in the loan shark business, but they're also involved in trafficking women. Yes, but they only traffic young girls who owe them money. They didn't dabble in anything else. Are their relatives all dead, with so many people implicated? How come no one has reported this case?" Angrily, the emperor demanded. Xiaoheng made an awkward laugh. At first, the victims did file a report. They were not only denied justice, but they were also taught a lesson. As a result, no one dared do so anymore. The emperor understood what had happened and asked, "Are the officials from back then still around?" "Yes, one of them has also entered the Ministry of Revenue." "Good, very good." The emperor gritted his teeth. He ordered, "Arrest Yang Shiqing and all those officials. Send them to the Ministry of Justice. Also, get that so-called Master Wen, Brother Hu, and the others who helped them. Arrest them and confiscate their property." "Yes, this subordinate will see to it immediately." Xiaoheng turned around and was about to leave after that. The emperor quickly called out to him, "Wait a minute, have you found any clues about Yang Shiqing's corruption?" Chapter 536. Manner. No, the Ministry of Revenue is like an iron bucket. The people I sent in couldn't come into contact with anything substantial. I'm afraid it'll take some time before there's news. Xiaoheng shook his head. "You may leave." The emperor waved his hand in disappointment. He was getting worried about the situation at the Ministry of Revenue. It seemed that he had to break this deadlock. Otherwise, he wouldn't even know if the National Treasury had been emptied that day. But who would be suitable? He flipped through the list of resumes of officials of the third rank and above. Zhou Ying, on the other hand, had been watching the emperor's every move, curious about the Cui family's future. After receiving an answer from the emperor, she immediately told Gu Qingrui, "The emperor has sent people to capture Yang Shiqing. What should we do now? Should we send a message to Yang Wanning?" "No need. This has nothing to do with her. The less she knows, the better." Gu Qingrui shook his head and replied, "All right, but one don't know when they will be able to sever their father-daughter relationship. This is hard to say. Yang Shiqing won't let go unless it's necessary. If Yang Shiqing doesn't say anything, Yang Wanning mustn't take the initiative. Otherwise, her reputation would be ruined as an unfilial daughter." Zhou Ying nodded in agreement. Usually, if the parents were still around, it would be difficult for a person to separate from their family, let alone sever a father-daughter relationship. She then asked, "By the way, how are the vegetables growing in the manor?" "They're fine. The spinach and rapeseed have already grown tender seedlings. As long as any extreme weather doesn't appear, we might be able to plant another crop before the new year. Do you want to try garlic?" "It's better not to. It's not appropriate to take out the seeds now. Let's put it off until next year." "Oh, I've already asked Brother Zhou about the farm you asked me to investigate. It belongs to neither Prince Hui nor the Yang family, but someone called Wang Li." However, he did not recognize this person. Could it be an alias? It could be, or it could be someone under Prince Hui. That's true. There aren't even any photos of the person right now. For someone with high status like Prince Hui, it's too easy to fabricate a fake identity. By the way, Brother Zhou said it's impossible for us to buy a farm. We can only think of a way to build it ourselves. However, he did recommend a place to me. It's at the foot of West Mountain, not far from the Hot Spring Manor. It said that place is overgrown with thorns and weeds. It was about 2,000 acres, and there's a river on the side. If the place is rebuilt, it will be enough to supply the restaurant. Is there any flaw? If I knew the higher-ups would be so strict, I wouldn't have joined a group. Now, I'm afraid I'll be exiled even if I survive this ordeal." When Yang Shiqing heard him say that, he immediately thought of the Cui family's loan shark business. He quickly asked the man whether they were part of the Cui family's group. "How did you know?" the man asked, looking at him warily. "I heard about it. This has spread throughout the prison over the past 2 days. Looks like we're really screwed this time," the man said dejectedly. After realizing what was happening, Yang Shiqing didn't dare ask any more questions. These people would most likely tear him apart if his identity were revealed. After Yang Shiqing had been captured from the Yang residence, Yang Wanning and Yang Wanyu also received the news. By the time they chased after him, he had already left. Yang Wanyu immediately ordered Yang Wanning, "Hurry up and beg King Rui to see if he can save father as soon as possible." Yang Wanning sneered after hearing this. "Why don't you go to Prince Hui? Mother has a good relationship with the Empress, so begging them will give you a better chance." After saying that, she just returned to her small courtyard. Chapter 538. Persuading him. When Yang Wanyu saw this, she was so anxious that she stomped her feet. However, she also knew that if she went to look for Prince Hui now, she would always have to lower her head before him after they got married. This would be detrimental to her future. But if she didn't save her father, what would happen to her marriage? Her dowry and her wedding would all be ruined. "You're the eldest in the family. Are you just going to watch your parents get jailed and not care? So now you think me of your elder sister? I've never heard you call me sister once. HJH, it's too late. Begging anyone won't help us. You'd better return to bed. Well, go to prison tomorrow and ask father for his opinion. After Yang Wanning finished speaking, she left. When she returned to her courtyard, Chuanxi helped her wash up, hesitantly asking, "Young miss, are you really planning to meddle in your father's matters? I heard the people who took master away were the palace guards. No matter what, I have to do something to show action. By the way, are the servants in the courtyard obedient now?" "Yes. Ever since Mrs. Chui was arrested, everyone has been doing their best. We can't relax at times like this. Otherwise, if something happens, it'll be bad." "I understand." Chuanxi nodded solemnly. The next day, Gu Qingrui brought more than 10 sticks of roasted donkey meat and left for the manor in a carriage with Lin Yitian. Meanwhile, Zhou went to the kitchen to prepare the base and dipping sauce for her hot pot. When she came out, she saw Zhou Dong yawning in the distance. She called him and asked, "Brother Zhou Dong, what's wrong? Those who don't know better would think you were out late stealing last night. I wish one had the skills of a thief. At least I can earn money quickly. After over half a month of learning, I finally understand that doing business is complicated and difficult." Zhou smiled and asked, "So, what are you thinking? Do you want to quit?" "No. What other options do I have? Farming is even more tiring." Zhou Dong paused and continued, "To be honest, although one don't have freedom and sometimes I get beaten up, my life is pretty comfortable. At least one don't have to worry about food and clothing." Zhou secretly rolled her eyes after hearing that. That was because he had his parents protecting him. Otherwise, he wouldn't even know how he died. So, she still tried to persuade him. "Everything has a process. You've been living too comfortably, so you can't stand the sudden change. After some time, I'm sure it will get easier once you're familiar with your work. Just like when you started farming, wasn't that as difficult as well?" "That's right. All right, I'll have to leave. Otherwise, it'll be late." When the first prince received the news, he was nervous. He was afraid that Yang Shiqing would beg him for help. If he refused, who knew what Yang Shiqing would do next? On the other hand, the third prince did not care about this and just went about his daily business. As for Yang Wanning, he was fully supportive of her after learning from Gu Qingrui that she wanted to leave the Yang family. After all, Yang Shiqing was his oldest brother's aide. He didn't want to have anything to do with him. Otherwise, it would be troublesome if he was schemed against one day. At the Yang family, Yang Wanyu was panicking because she knew very well that without the protection of her grandmother and mother, her status in the Yang residence might be even worse compared to Yang Wanning. Just as she was about to go wild with worry, Yang Qinglin and Yang Qingxin rushed back. Looking at their house, which clearly showed signs of decline, they understood that their families might be finished. Therefore, they ran anxiously to their sisters. Yang Qingxin entered Yang Wanyu's courtyard and saw her worried face. He quickly went up and asked, "Sister, what is going on? Are grandmother and mother really going to be executed?" Chapter 540 Choices 1. Yang Wanyu felt a little comforted after seeing her brother, so she immediately told him what had happened in the past few days. "Qingxin, what do you think we should do now? Father was really jailed." "Yes, but the announcement didn't mention anything about father. One don't know if he'll come out. Let's hurry up and find Prince Hui. We can't let grandmother and mother really be executed. If that happens, it will affect our future." Yang Wanyu froze for a moment. Although she agreed with his words, she still reprimanded him straight-faced. At a time like this, you're still thinking about your future. What else can we do? We must think of a way to save them as soon as possible. After Yang Wanyu heard this, her face was filled with reluctance. If she were to go, it would significantly lower her position in Prince Hu's residence. Hurry up. If father gets a stepmother, we won't have it good in the future. After Yang Qingsun finished speaking, he dragged her out. When Yang Wanyu heard the word stepmother, she remembered Yang Wanning's treatment and finally followed him out. Yang Qinglin anxiously ran into Yang Wanning's small courtyard, stunned to see his sister sitting in her room leisurely drinking tea. He asked unhappily, "Sis, why are you still in the mood to drink tea?" Yang Wanning ignored him and poured him a cup of tea. "Drink some tea to moisten your throat." Yang Qinglin sat in annoyance when he saw her acting like nothing had happened. Still, he picked up his teacup. The tea was scalding hot and almost burned his tongue off. In addition, his trembling hand spewed some tea, scalding it. His cup fell to the ground and broke into pieces. Yang Wanning put down her teacup and said, "Don't worry. The tea is a little hot, but it won't burn your hand. It'll be fine. Don't you understand? If you're in a hurry, you won't even be able to drink a cup of tea properly." Yang Qingsun jolted and asked thoughtfully, "Sis, what do you mean? You came back because of grandmother and mother's execution tomorrow, right?" "Yes, there are also people who say father has been jailed." "That's right. Father was taken away yesterday." Yang Wanning gestured for him to sit down and told him what had happened in the past few days. "I'm sure you've heard that the emperor hand-wrote this announcement. When have you heard that the emperor changes an imperial edict? If I'm right, the Chui family must have harmed many people through their loan shark business. Therefore, it was useless to plead for mercy. As for your father, since the announcement did not mention him, he's fine for now. Moreover, his mother will be executed tomorrow. As her son, he would have to collect her corpse, so he would most likely come back tomorrow." Chapter 541 Choices 2. Yang Chenglin's face was filled with disbelief. However, when he saw his sister's solemn expression and remembered the conversation between Mrs. Chui and her, he was convinced. However, was their mother's death really the fault of Mrs. Chui? Thinking of this, he looked at her and asked, "Is there any evidence to prove that mother was killed by Mrs. Chui?" "To be honest, I also thought she died of illness, but later one overheard she froze to death. When cousin Zhou confirmed the hardy ice plant in my tea, I suddenly remembered the cause of mother's death. However, they did it too discreetly. The people who served mother were either sold or dismissed by Mrs. Chui. One can't verify it for sure." "Who said mother froze to death?" Yang Qinglin clenched his fists and asked with a darkened face. "It was Yang Wanyu who accidentally let it slip. She said Mrs. Chui sent someone to cut off mother's charcoal supply, so..." Yang Qinglin stood up immediately. Since it came from Yang Wanyu's mouth, it was basically confirmed. Thinking of this, he quickly ran out. He had to go to prison and ask his father if he knew about this. Yang Wanning immediately grabbed him and asked, "Where are you going?" "I'm going to ask father." "Do you think he will admit it?" "2-inch sit down." Yang Wanning pulled him back and sat him down, saying, "I didn't tell you before because I was afraid you would act impulsively. I'm telling you now so we don't have to care about Mrs. Chui. It's their fate whether they live or not." Yang Wanning feared her brother would still make a fool of himself, so she stood up and said, "Let's go." "Well, pick someone up." "Who?" "Do you still remember Mrs. Sun, who was by mother's side?" "I do. She's part of mother's dowry, someone who never married." "Yes, I think she should know something. Let's go to the manor and take a look." Yang Qinglin hesitated for a moment before nodding and following her out. After they went to the kitchen to get some food, they took Chunxi with them and rode a carriage to the manor in the suburbs. Once they had left the range of Zhou Ying's divine senses, she no longer followed them. Instead, she focused her attention on Yang Wanyu. The two siblings were left alone in Prince Hu's living room. There was not even a single person to serve them tea. After about 15 minutes, Yang Qingsen stood angrily and said, "Sis, what is brother-in-law doing? We've been waiting for so long, but there's no one even here to greet us." Yang Wanyu smiled bitterly. She knew this would happen but still held a glimmer of hope. "Let's wait a little longer. His Highness is busy. Isn't our issue more urgent?" Yang Qingsen sat down angrily. However, no one came. Even Yang Qingsen quickly understood that the first prince was turning a blind eye to them. The siblings looked at each other and got up to walk out. At this moment, Consort Hui walked over from afar. "Sister Yang, shouldn't you wait for a while? His Highness should be back soon. If His Highness isn't in the residence, why didn't the servant say so earlier?" Yang Wanyu looked at her and asked indignantly. "Oh, such a temper. I just returned from my parents' home and didn't know there were guests. The servants should have guessed your intentions, so they left you for His Highness' presence. You should know that the members of the royal family and the first-grade officials are in the palace at this time." Consort Hui smiled and replied. However, today was an exception. The first prince did not enter the palace after breakfast. Instead, he stayed in his study with his advisors and did not come out. So, this meant the first prince's absence was definitely intentional. He refused to meet the young siblings. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.